shadows of silence. Grace and Paul never truly loved each other. Their marriage was more of a duty than a choice. Paul had gotten Grace pregnant before they were married, and, out of shame or responsibility, they tied the knot. But even with the wedding vows, their love wasn't strong. Grace, a kind-hearted woman, thought that marriage would bring her happiness, but she soon realized that it wasn't enough. Paul, on the other hand, never really gave her his heart. He wasn't a bad man, but he often spent more time looking at other women than caring for Grace. He worked hard, but his attention was always elsewhere, on fleeting passions, on women who caught his eye. He didn't know how to love her properly, and he didn't know how to be a father either. They had 6 children. Grace gave birth to a son and 5 daughters, the oldest being Chisholm. Chisholm's birth was special, but it would also mark the beginning of a painful story. From the very start, Chisholm didn't feel the warmth of strict discipline. Grace didn't know how to scold her. She believed that kindness would be enough to guide her children. Grace was always gentle, even when the children misbehaved, but sometimes kindness isn't enough. Sometimes a little firmness is needed. Paul, on the other hand, was hardly ever home. When he was home, his mind was often on something else. He would give little attention to his children, especially Chisholm, who needed a father's guidance. He was busy with his work, his distractions, and his own desires. Chisholm grew up feeling like something was missing. She wanted attention. She wanted someone to see her, to guide her, to tell her when she was wrong. But that never happened. Grace was too soft to show Chisholm where she was going wrong, and Paul was too distracted to care. As Chisholm entered her teenage years, she began to look for the love and attention she didn't receive at home. Unfortunately, she looked for it in the wrong places. At 15, Chisholm became pregnant. She couldn't even remember the name of the man who had gotten her pregnant. She had been with so many men that it was hard for her to keep track. She had never learned the value of respect for herself. Her heart, though young, was already so broken that it was searching for anything that might fill the emptiness. When she found out she was pregnant, it should have been a moment of realization, but it wasn't. She didn't cry for what she had done. She didn't regret her actions. Instead, she continued the same cycle, going from one man to another. She didn't care that she was carrying a child. The only thing that mattered was that she had the attention she craved. Grace, in her soft-spoken way, tried to talk to her. She tried to explain what motherhood meant, what responsibility was. But Chisholm didn't listen. She was stubborn, lost in her own world, thinking only about herself. Months passed, and Chisholm's belly grew. She gave birth to a beautiful baby, but it didn't change her behavior. As soon as the baby was born, she ran away, leaving her child with Grace. She didn't even look back. Grace was heartbroken. She didn't know what to do. She had raised her daughter with love and care, but it wasn't enough. Grace didn't scold her children, believing that they would turn out good if she just loved them enough. But now, looking at the empty cradle where Chisholm's baby once lay, Grace realized her mistake. Paul didn't even seem to care. He had never been much of a father, and this situation only seemed to make him more distant. He didn't check on Chisholm. He didn't wonder where she had gone. All he thought about was his own happiness, his own desires. In fact, he even mentioned the idea of taking a second wife. He couldn't see how deeply he had failed as a father. He was too focused on his own life. Grace, now 43 years old, was left to deal with the consequences. She was raising Chisholm's child as her own, while Chisholm was nowhere to be found. Grace couldn't even begin to explain what had happened to her daughter. She felt like a failure, like she had missed something, like she had been too lenient, too soft-hearted. For years, Chisholm stayed away. She never came back to visit, never asked how her child was. She had no idea what it meant to be a mother. She didn't understand the sacrifices Grace made to care for her baby. Chisholm had run away from her responsibilities, thinking that running from her problems would solve them. But deep down, she knew she had made a mistake. The guilt ate at her, but she refused to face it. Back at home, Grace would cry at night, wishing she had done things differently. She would think about the mistakes she had made and wonder if there was a way to bring Chisholm back. But Grace knew that she couldn't change the past. All she could do was pray for her daughter's return, even though she was too proud to ask for forgiveness. Grace had learned a painful lesson. She had been too silent, too passive. She had thought that silence would make everything better, that letting her children figure things out on their own would help them grow. But now she realized that silence was not the answer. Silence had allowed Chisholm to drift away, to make decisions without guidance. Grace knew that she had failed as a mother, but she also realized that she had to stop making the same mistakes with her other children. She had to be more present, more involved. She couldn't let them slip through her fingers like Chisholm had. Paul, now 45, finally began to see the consequences of his actions. He wanted to marry a second wife, but deep down, he knew he couldn't keep running from his responsibilities. His own daughter had left, his wife was broken, and his family was in pieces. He realized that he had failed his children, failed his wife, and failed himself. He tried to talk to Grace, to apologize for not being there for her or for their children. But it was too late. The damage had been done. Grace had long since stopped depending on him for anything. She had learned to carry her burdens alone. In the end, the story of Chisholm, Grace, and Paul is a tragic one. It's a story of neglect, of failure, of missed opportunities. Grace had been too kind, too passive, and Paul had been too distracted, too focused on his own desires. Chisholm had paid the price for their mistakes. But there is a lesson to be learned here. Parents must teach their children the value of self-respect, the importance of responsibility, and the consequences of their actions. Silence is not always the answer. Children need guidance, discipline, and love, not just kindness. Grace has learned this lesson the hard way. And though Chisholm may never return, Grace knows she must keep raising the rest of her children with the lessons she's learned. She can't change the past, but she can ensure that the future is different. Share with us what you learned or what Grace should have done. Meanwhile, don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment. We love you here in Annescape Hub.